Recording in progress. Yeah.
As chair of the Fire Safety Council in Georgetown, have written 5 grants and gotten 3 of them. And we're in the, no, I've written 6 grants and gotten 4 of them. And I've completed 1 project and are in the process of the next 3. Sorry, I lost track. Years. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I first started this process. I had written grants before as a fundraiser. It's what I do, but not for fire stuff. And so it was quite the learning experience, as I'm sure it is for many of you in this room. And I really had no idea what was involved in implementing the project. Luckily, our first grant was pretty small, so I kind of got a crash course on something small, but as they've gotten bigger and more complex, every single time we do a project, I feel like I'm still learning. And knowing how complex those projects have become has actually impacted whether we apply for the next. And so I wish that's where the idea for the workshop came from, is I wish I had known before I started working on this project what I know now. So this is an attempt to help you understand, as you're thinking about doing projects in your community, understand what those projects actually look like when you're implementing them, what your role is expected to be and needed to be as community members, how much time goes into it. And that can help you hopefully craft a better scope of work, understand what partners you need to be bringing in early on, all of those things. And this is intended to be interactive because there's lots of people in this room who've done projects themselves. So feel free to chime in with your own experiences, with questions as we go along. Mark's going to be doing most of it, but I'll be chiming in, and I hope that everybody else here will chime in too, because this is a kind of a group effort for all of us to understand what's involved and to support each other in making the project be as successful and easy as we can make them up front. So I'll introduce Mark, who's been our project partner. We've worked with the RCD as our project manager for all of our grant projects. Although it's possible to work with other project managers, we worked with RCD. So I invited Mark to present this workshop from his perspective as project manager and how these projects unfold. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Hello again. Mark Egbert, for those of you who were not in the Fire Safety Council meeting, I'm the district manager with the El Dorado and the Georgetown Divide Resource Conservation Districts. And can everybody see the screen? Everybody can hear everything okay? So you've got a grant now. So let's just classify terminology of what a grant is. There's small grants that you can get for $500 to do, hot dog socials to increase awareness, or you could have a multi-million-dollar grant to rebuild a dam and fit in the school. We manage both. And so one thing you want to do is always, appreciate and reflect back on what got you. There's people who volunteered, who put in a lot of time to try to build the project proposal, to build the application, look at all the trails and the history of what they have over the years of being successful. So always take an opportunity to look back and reflect on how you got the grant and say thank you, to the grantor, but to all the people who were volunteering their time to make that happen. So it's pretty cool, right? It's a reflection of success. So even like Firewise, what a successful achievement, and people won't know what all went into that, but they'll, inherit the benefits of it for sure. I know I will. And so anyway, so thank you very much. So one of the things you want to do when you get this grant is be accountable. Because all of a sudden you're dealing with other people's money. It's the public's money. And so you have to have integrity and accountability. And at some point, you're going to be audited. At some point, people are going to file an injunction. At some point, people are going to file a lawsuit. And at some point, you're going to have to put your cards face up on the table and show everybody what you got. And there are no prisoners. You know, I mean, when the lawyers get involved, it is brass tacks. Okay, accountability falls somewhere on someone. So your organizational framework identifies who that is. You know, who's going to be accountable for this? One thing that we as an RCD do is that when we take on a fire safety council grant, we say, all right, we are going to hire all the consultants, we're going to hire the contractors, and we're going to defend the integrity of this project. And that's what we do, because we accept the accountability for that project, for the actions that we're taking on other people's property using the public's funds. We're accountable for the environmental compliance, so we're going to get into all that. But establishing an organizational framework is really important because it lets everybody knows who's involved and what role they have. And so if we have someone who's involved with communications, well, here they are, here's their name, and that's the person you're going to talk to as far as communications. We have an issue that says basically, oh, hey, this letter went out into the community and I didn't see it. Who's accountable for that? Right? You don't want to go to the GIS person, right? You want to go to the communications person. So establish an organizational framework. It also provides a administrative and a decision-making sort of framework. So who's going to make the decision, right? That's really important to know. You could have an administrative framework for the implementation side, but you also have an overarching administrative framework that could be a board of directors. It could be, you know, a governing board. It's definitely going to be inclusive of the grantor. You're going to have a responsible agency. You're going to have, you know, a lead agency, and so it's all going to be identified in this organizational framework, and it's really important to maintain that. When you get a grant, one of the first things that you want to do is read the agreement, right? We're trying to get into an agreement with Caltrans right now, and we're like, oh, we got the money, we got the project, we got all this, but the agreement isn't something that will allow us to be successful on the project until we work some of these things out. And we're doing that, and eventually it'll get worked out, but you have to read the agreement, right? If you do a poster and you put it up on the community and you don't put the clause in there recognizing who funded the project, you know, you're in jeopardy of them having to return the money to them. You definitely don't want to do, you know. So read it, read the information, and then make sure that every single one of your subcontracts contains specific language that carries on and throughout every contract that you write. Every agreement that we provide to a consultant or a contractor has an exhibit of our grant agreement, and they are subject to the clauses of all the agreements that are overarching, so that we don't just hire someone to make a map and all of a sudden they make a map and they're gone. And, you know, say it's prevailing wage project and they didn't pay prevailing wage or whatever the case might be. So read it, read the terms. You want to be on schedule, you want to be in scope, and you want to be within budget. Those are the three things that you leave this workshop with anything: the term, the scope of work, and the budget. Those are the three things that you manage on a project. And so then you'll so again, that's everything. I think I can go. So and then also I mentioned on here before, document the project. So one of the things that you do when you get really busy is you just don't do it good enough, you know. And if you have one project, you can do it really well, right? And you've got the time, you've got the commitment to it, and you're just, you know how it is, right? How much time do I have to clean the house? You got all day, you turn the radio on, you get in there, you scrub, and it looks amazing. If you got 10 minutes, you do what you can. And if you have a really complicated project, make sure that you invest the time to make sure the quality of the project is something that you can reflect on, because CAL FIRE or Forest Service, I was talking to Jacoby outside the door right here. And he was saying like, oh my gosh, you guys nailed that Gold Ridge project. You got it done like that. I love those photos, and I learned from Patrick, hey, make my job easy. Give me the information that makes my job easy. So when you do a report out on a grant or you're invoicing, make it the best that you can. And being overwhelmed or being understaffed or having too much to do is an excuse. And it's not, it shouldn't be like that. So hold people accountable. Janet does that. She does that. And sometimes it's like, oh, but it has to.
They always say that about me.
Don't we know?
It's Jan,
So,
absolutely.
but I'm then re-emphasizing accountability, hold people accountable, we're getting paid for this. Get before and after photographs, when we go to the South County meeting, we've got a grant. We told people all the time, like I always tell these guys, hold us accountable, right? If we are out to do this, make sure you can keep us on track. So don't not do that. Okay.
Well, and I just want to mention, in terms of invoicing, RCD will invoice, the project manager will invoice for the pieces of the project that they are in charge of, but there may be other parts of your budget that they're not part of. So for instance, if you have in there like supplies and printing, and that's going through your fire safe council, then somebody from the fire safe council will need to track those invoices and get them to Janet so that they get paid out of the grant. So there's RCD will submit their invoices to the fire safe council and review them, right? Is that the way it's working, Janet? And then you add on your invoices and then you send it out. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually just extra time when you're, whoever's your point person at your fire safe council that's reviewing that needs to quarterly look at those invoices and review them and make sure they're adequate and then add in your own.
Particularly if you have, sorry. Particularly if you have cost of your fire safety council is covering over and above what the RCD is doing. You want to make sure you validate those costs and provide them as well, because I can't, we at Hartford can't bill for that money unless I have the invoices and all the documentation that goes with it to make that invoice request to the bank.
And what goes along with the invoices are the reports. So most funders require quarterly reports, which personally I think is excessive, but that's what they require. And so your invoices need to match the report. And again, the RCD will do the report on the activity that they're in charge of. But if you have extra things in your proposal that they're not doing, or in your grant budget that they're not doing, you need to add in to the quarterly reports and then make sure that they match the invoices. So again, it's, and I, as a grants manager, will generally upload them to the system. But you, as a fire safe council, are in charge of looking at the reports that RCD does and adding your own, and then making sure that they're accurate. Because I, as a grants manager, aren't going to know if they're accurate.
And so when we talk about different things in concept, like the invoice and things like that, you never know what's really in the backup documentation, right? All of the things that are really required, because eventually, like I said, you're going to be audited. So when we talk about, an invoice for postage, things like that, you got to have the receipt for what for the postage stamps that you bought from the post office, right? If you don't have it, you won't get reimbursed, right? So so again, scope of work, budget, it's the details of the project. There's a lot of things, or a lot of times you guys don't see, when the contractor invoices us for a contract and they don't have their taxpayer identification number on their invoice, it's not payable. If they don't have a current valid contractor's license, it's not valid. If they don't have workers' compensation, it's not valid. And let's say they had it yesterday, but they don't have it today. How do you check that? How do you check with, Caltrans to make sure that there's a valid LTO license, or, all the things that, again, the integrity of things. So we'll talk about we really dive in. So if you guys have any questions as we talk about surface topics, just raise your hand and ask, okay? Yes.
Well, I was gonna bring up one other thing.
What are we gonna do?
There's
do
that agreement
microphones?
between.
Hey, Lester, can we probably should get you a microphone?
Well, I was gonna just mention, early on, there's that agreement between the RCD or whoever the project manager is, it's essentially a contract. And the overall County Fire Safety Council, or whoever is the fiscal sponsor. But then another agreement that kind of filled in is the agreement between the Fire Safety Council, County Fire Safety Council. And the entity that's actually put in the grant application and received and is implementing the project. In coordination with whoever the project manager is. And it becomes really critical as we start talking about bigger and bigger projects of what's that internal relationship amongst the associate fire safety councils. So I would just kind of encourage that that having everything spelled out. When you should talk about organization structure, there's multiple layers to that.
Yeah, and so Lester was talking about, like, if Cal Fire Funds, the El Dorado County Fire Safety Council and the Satellite Fire Safety Council are very involved. And then the RCD is working under a contract with the County Fire Safety Council. What's the role of the Associate Fire Safety Council? And, you know, I will tell you that historically, the Satellite Fire Safety Councils and the El Dorado County Fire Safety Council weren't involved at all. We would report out to them, we would give them information, we would meet with them at hot dog socials on Saturday, they helped promote the project, but they relied on us to deliver the project. We even did the reporting to Cal Fire for them. We just asked them to put their signature on. And so things change for the better. And, you know, the role, every fire safety council is different and every project is different. You know, if we're, my gosh, when we go out to Mosquito, I was sitting there talking this morning, so we've got foresters out there right now developing forest management plans on 600 acres. And we wanted to do that before we started the Stevens Authority project. So we got that, to get that underway, and we could show how we're complementing that. You know, that's not happening over, you know, in Longview, you know, so every project's different, every relationship is different. So when you do that organizational chart and you develop your working relationships and you have an individual who might have more capacity than somebody else, you know, Lester, you've got a huge amount of capacity that we will rely on, right? Whereas somebody, you know, Kathy here in Greenstone, you're just, you know, you might be newer and might rely on us. So it's different, you know, with you in Texas Hill, my gosh, they went out and got every right of entry agreement 100%. They got all those and they said, here you go, Mark. And we're like, this is amazing, you know, and so time well spent, you know. So anyway, beyond that, here's an example of pre-photo documentation. Words tell 1,000 words. We do public workshops. I know when we were going out to you know, Rancho del Sol and Lakes Trail and that whole area right there, we were like, hey, we want to take you guys over to Sly Park and look at the machines that we're running over there, you know, and they were like, whoa, is that what type of machine you're gonna put over here? And we're like, yes. You know, we were talking to people and they're like, wow, you know, that's really violent. Are you gonna be doing that here? And we're like, yes. You know, you have to understand the project. And before and after are really good pictures. Plus, you know, the people at the state, they're not gonna get up there when they get the invoice at the state. They're gonna have our forestry report, they're gonna have the unit forester sign off on it. And having them see the pictures is gonna be really, really important. And when you do community events, when we do community meetings, pictures are like, God, if we could just show pictures, people will get it, you know. Okay. Speaking of meetings, when we kick off a meeting, I'll refer to rescue. We went to rescue because we have a Tahoe Central Sierra Initiative grant. We're developing vegetation management plans like we did at Texas Hill, Homo Ranch, Mount Autumn, Copperton, Lake Hills. You know, we've done a ton of them. Some of them got grant funding, but when we have these first meetings, we basically say, hey, we understand you guys, this is your project. This is not an RCD project. We don't own property out here. You know, we're not regulatory, we're not jurisdictional in any way. We're here to implement your project. So you guys tell us what you want. And a lot of times people say, well, we don't even know what that is. We just are afraid that we're going to lose everything to a fire. So how can you help us develop this project? And I think that's where the relationship really began. Is you kick it off, you tell people who you are, what you can do, you hear their concerns, you shake the bush, people are going to be there who are going to have problems. I said, bring them. get the people here who are gonna have problems, because we want them right here, right now, right in front of us, because we know when we start putting equipment on the ground, they will be. All right, and that's, you don't want them there then, you know, you want them early. So kickoff meetings are really, really, really important. And the, gosh, you guys at the Fire Safety Council, we have relied on you guys for community engagement since day one. That's your job, right? Your project, we don't say these aren't RCD projects anymore. You know, these are Fire Safety Council projects, and so we're here to support you. And that means a lot, because people start identifying the project as a community project. You know, and I think that's really, really, really important.
So if I want to talk a little bit about the project map, because we've run, to Mark's point, we've, and many of our projects sort of done it backwards, which is why we're trying to do more of like upfront pre-project, pre-proposal community organizing. Because what's happened with us is we've put together the project based on a few people who were involved, and then had the community meeting. And then people are like, well, what about my street? And what about my street? And I don't know if I think some other fire safety councils had similar issues. And, you know, the people who are going to get really involved were the ones who are going to help with the ROEs were like, well, I want my street part of this project. And so I feel like we're haggling over the project map after we've gotten the grant. And luckily our funders have been, you know, supportive of that to a certain extent, but I just realized that that's just not the way I want to do this. It's you spend a lot of time like dealing with the project map after you've gotten the grant, and really we should be doing it front, to the extent possible. I mean, I don't know if you can totally eliminate
Traffic between that.
being like, well, what about my street and where we use it for, but I'm trying with our projects to do that before we even apply for the grant and do all that planning, you know, upfront. So just to mention that, that can be a challenge.
And so let's say you get to the point where Tamara's talking about, where you have the conceptual map that was submitted to the grantor for funding and they accepted it, right? But you didn't have your forestry team on, you didn't do your environmental yet, and then you got to do that during the first year of your project, right? So, oh my gosh, you're delayed. No, we're not delayed. We have to, by law, complete these surveys, and by law, we have to flag and delineate the project. And so when we do that, the map changes. You know, when you get right of entry agreements, all of a sudden your map changes. When you don't get right of entry agreements, your map changes. And so when you have your organizational framework that says who's going to make the decision on where that money goes, right? What we've done is we've said, here's a recommendation to the Fire Safety Council. You can make that decision and help us with that, you know, to modify that map. When we modify that map, we'll go to the grantor, and, you know, the grantor says, well, let me take a look at that. Okay. Is it going to be CEQA? Is it within the intent of your grant? Can we approve that without a formal amendment to your contract? Usually it's yes, we can do that, you know, and then you move on, you know, and so you have to be adaptive. You could have the map and it could be final, right? You go to contract with that map, your contractor has that map, and all of a sudden the landowner sells their property and the new property owner doesn't want to participate. Well, that's a change in the map, right? That budget needs to be reallocated somewhere. So as we talk about organizational chart, scope of work, the project map, all community involvement, your role, it all kind of fits together. You can see how we're kind of molding this together to say, you know, as we continue, we put this Gantt chart together. These are things we're going to be going through, you know, and experiencing as we implement this project. Do you want to talk about this one? Or you want me to talk? Okay.
Yeah, so I think there's many people in the room that are ROEs of like the bane of our existence, right? Back to what I said earlier, we're really trying to do the community involvement even before we apply for the grant, just to start steering our projects more towards areas where people actually want to be involved and are willing to get the right of entry agreements on their property. So, I mean, and for their neighbors. Like, for example, we have a grant on Marshall Road that before we even applied for it, I was like, you know what, I actually don't have the capacity to deal with the ROE. So there needs to be some people who live on the street that want to do it, or we just can't apply for the grant. And, you know, some people stepped up and actually did it and are working on the ROE. So I was like, yeah, you can't do it unless you have more people helping you. And the bigger the project, the more ROEs. Like, we have a $5 million grant and just sent out letters to, I think, 170 participating landowners, which that's a lot of ROEs to get, like a lot. Like, luckily, we've done a good job of doing a lot of community education in the area. So I think more and more people are, you know, they're seeing the work that's happening in the community. So it's snowballing to a certain extent. So we right off the bat, I think got 40 million back in the mail, which is pretty incredible. I was really surprised because our other projects have not been that successful when you send out the mailing. So the way it's working now, I believe, and you can say this, is RCD prepares, and actually you can click on that that link. We can show you. RCD prepares a website about the project, and Holly, who's the communications person in the RCD office, sends out physical letters to all of the potential participants to the addresses that are on file as the owner of record. And it's parcels that are, depending on the project, but parcels that may or may not be occupied with the structure. So a lot of them can be just vacant land, which can be the harder people to get. Unfortunately, the owner of record phone numbers is just the county record. So that makes it especially hard to get ROEs because, you know, there's just something getting sent to them in the mail. And if they don't live there, it's really hard to do knock on doors because there's no door to knock. I mean, people might own property in your project area that they live in San Jose, or what we've also found when we send out the ROE letter is that people will, well, you have a contact information. So I have put my name on the contact information for people to call. They can also call RCD and they can also email us. I have to say, it's a lot of time to answer those calls. And so it's just something to be prepared for, that someone needs to be the point person from your fire safe council to answer questions, be able to answer questions about the project and call people back. And I don't know, I was surprised at just how much time it takes. I mean, you can end up getting in a conversation with somebody for like a half an hour easily. And not everybody's happy about what you're doing either. So, and especially where I live, and I know other people in more remote areas, a lot of people live where they live because they don't want to deal with their neighbors and they don't want to deal with the government. They assume we're the government, which is why I think it's important to have a fire safe council volunteer as the point person, because you can speak as a neighbor, like, oh, I'm one of you, I'm your neighbor, I live on Spanish Flat Road, and you know, here's all the other work we're doing. I just think it gives some credibility to, especially to the people who are suspicious of what you're doing and maybe a little angry, maybe they're mad at PG&E. I get those calls and people are mad at PG&E and they're mad at whatever we're going to do for them, or you know. So just be prepared that ROEs take, I think, the most amount of time from the fire safe council involvement. There's not only the answering all the questions, but then someone or someone's need to be take ownership over getting those ROEs. And Deborah's not here today, but Bobby can speak to this, your ROE process. Because you guys did even before you submitted your proposal, you were asking for road ambassadors, right?
Right.
Which I thought was brilliant. So how has that been going for you? In terms of, can you talk about what the road ambassador model?
Okay, first of all, it wasn't my idea, it was Deborah's. And I really got credit, and I think Linda Kirkbride also, Linda Kirkbride and Deborah learned so much from that. I sort of came into the project after the grant was awarded. I mean, they sort of pushed me into it. And it's really been a good learning experience. The road ambassadors have worked out well. We've got road ambassadors volunteering to do certain streets, even though their particular area is not part of the grant. Now, and as you just said, we're just, I asked Mark, I said, I want to get 100%. I want to get 100%. We're sort of hanging around 65, I think, right now. And so, now we're knocking on doors, and Linda Kirkbride, again, I can't say enough about Linda. She is, if you don't know Linda, she was a CalStar med flight nurse for 30 years and used to giving orders, and she'll knock on a door, and I mean, she'll tell it like it is, and hey, your neighbors aren't going to be happy with you if you don't sign this. And I've sort of learned that from her. So, I'm doing the same thing. And so are our other road ambassadors, and we're little by little getting these things signed. First 50% was a piece of cake. And we thought, oh, this is great, and then we're sort of hanging down at about 65. Tell me it's 70 now, Mark.
I did 70.
Yeah.
Got a quick question. You were talking about getting the right of entry before even putting together a grant application. No?
No, I don't mean you should get the right of entries before you get an application, because to me that I know we've talked about that as a possibility, but I personally think that would be setting up people for unrealistic expectations, because what if you don't get the grant, right? But what I do think is a good idea is to talk about where projects might go and find out if you have people like Bob's talking about with the ambassadors who are willing to take on getting ROEs, going door to door and getting the hard to get ROEs in those areas.
Yeah, because I was looking at either your previous slide or whatever else, showing about bushes and the diameter of the tree. Well, those can't be really put down very well until after the word of a contract.
So another thing that's been successful for us in terms of getting ROEs is so our fire safety council across the Garden Valley Fire Protection District and the Georgetown Fire Protection District, and both of our fire districts are really involved and supportive of what we do. And so they actually volunteered, the Garden Valley ones volunteered to go in their uniform with their fire trucks and go door to door to get ROEs. And now the Georgetown, one of the Georgetown fire personnel is doing the same thing on Marshall Road. So if you're in one of the smaller fire districts like Mosquito, or it might be easier to get your fire district personnel to volunteer to help you. And that actually got a few holdouts, because they also explain the realities of which properties firefighters are able to go into, and what those properties look like, and whether they're going to be willing to risk their lives on a property that has no opening and it's totally overgrown. So there's some education that they're able to do that has a more gravitas coming from somebody in uniform. So yeah.
I thought I understand from the notebooks, how far the U.S. Forest Service money, how far website stuff, they are going to be either requiring or strongly recommending ROEs before ratification. They have a competitive proposal, I understand. The best way is to get them first, but that's very hard. And there have to be some way of walking on them. You get at least 80% of them. I don't know how we're going to handle that, but it definitely is changing.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we didn't apply for a Sierra Nevada Conservancy one because they were requiring ROEs fully before we even applied, and it just, I don't know. I think there's some funders that do require it. It feels unrealistic to me, based on just how our community is, but yeah, for maybe some that are. Yeah.
So, just walk it backwards, I think. So one thing that's gonna be required is you have to have a project treatment area map that's pretty accurate with GIS attributes that show how many acres, what your project objectives are, what your treatment methods are. And all that, who owns the property, what land ownership is it, federal, non-federal, things like that, what grant funded, so that we can, ultimately, they can look at it and say, okay, here's the project. So when you do a map like that, it says you're gonna work on somebody else's property, you're submitting that to the state, you kind of want to let them know, right? So even though we might not enter into an agreement, like a right of entry agreement, we are going to say, if we're gonna put a grant together, we're gonna ask people for a letter of interest or a letter of commitment saying, yes, if the RCD, Fire Safety Council, whoever obtains this grant, we will participate. And it's kind of nice because we're gonna hear all the people are gonna say like, no way too, and we'll be able to make sure that their property is not on the proposal at the same time. So you have to do that diligence because, you heard it today, we're only 10% through this. Well, we've been spending a year trying to get this right of entry agreement thing. We shouldn't be doing that. It's like I said, it's a perspective thing. You could either say, we are with the government, we're gonna offer a free program, it's a voluntary program, yes or no, or we're gone. That's easy. Or you can say, oh, we're the Fire Safety Council, we're your neighbors, we want you to participate, would you please consider this? And then 4 months later, you're still asking the same thing. You fish or cut bait, you either got to make a decision and move forward. And we're somewhat at a time where you got to start fishing. And so if you don't have right of entry agreements, you got to start the project. You've got to start it. Because when people start seeing the equipment, they start seeing their neighbor getting treated, and they go, oh, I see what you're doing. Okay, I get it now. I'll participate. And you're like, okay, great, we'll get you in. Or you tell them flat out, I'm sorry, but the train left the station. You're not in. You sometimes have to manage because you don't have time to babysit. I don't know what to say. Okay. And that kind of goes into this balance of the role of Fire Safety Council and the RCD. At some point, we as an RCD got to advise the Fire Safety Council that, we've got to make a different approach and be more aggressive. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. People were upset at PG&E, but when they get a letter from PG&E, they know that tree's going to be removed, right? They can complain all they want, but that tree's gone. So, it's the approach. OES comes in to Ernie's community and they said, we got phase 1, phase 2, get out of our way. And it's much different approach. So these are voluntary programs. They can quit in 24 hours. They don't have to participate, so, okay. You want me to dive into the surveys? When you start when you get the grant, you think, okay, let's go, let's get it done. Well, okay, wait a minute. Do you have your biological surveys done? Do you have your nesting bird surveys done? Do you have your migrational bird surveys done? Do you have your cultural resources report done? That should be done prior to CEQA. It's actually required to be done prior to CEQA. You should have CEQA done prior to applying for a grant.
Can you say what CEQA is?
CEQA is the California Environmental Quality. And we also know that if we're asking CAL FIRE for money, that's going to go into the federal responsibility area, the Forest Service lands, which is okay. If we don't have the National Environmental Quality Act, NEPA, decision memo signed, we're not going to get any funding for it. Because they're like, we're going to give you a grant that's going to take 2 years to do NEPA. We also should not expect to get a grant when it's going to take us a year or 2 to do CEQA and to do these surveys. But in many cases, that's the situation we're in. So the surveys that you will be expected and landowners will be notified about this. I think South County was just notified yesterday that we have archaeologists on site yesterday going all throughout the entire community, doing archaeological resources. And then we'll also be doing biological resources. That information will be provided to each landowner, right? It's their property, they get the information. But it takes time and it takes resources and it takes money. If you do not put money in your grant to budget for the amount of time and expenditures that is associated with doing these surveys, you're not going to get them done. So, yes, I'll give a microphone.
You can talk to, so this work needs to be done ahead of time.
how far ahead is too far ahead? It's like nesting birds, that's a seasonal thing, so you can get it the too far ahead. Back,
Yeah.
it seems like a timing juggernaut here.
So people always ask us, when does CEQA or NEPA expire? And my response is that as long as your decision, your project design and your environment and your place of the project do not change, it doesn't really expire. You have to do seasonal surveys every year, irregardless, to be compliant. So that's my answer.
You need right. You need rights of entry of some sort, to do those surveys.
So we don't require a right of entry agreement to access anybody's property to do any part of any type of project. We just need access. The right of entry agreement is really important because you can go out there and officially do a survey, but you can't replace a tree. You know what I mean? Well, what's done is done, and we need a right of entry agreement to make sure that both parties are protected. That then it comes to the question that, well, if you do a biological resource survey on my property, and I gave you permission to do that, and you find a California red-legged frog, does that limit my future use of my property? You know, and well, it might. You know, absolutely. It means that we can't do the project within a certain time frame, or we might have some design alterations that we have to make to a project, but the surveys allow us to go out there and identify sensitive resources that I believe are important to the overall landscape. You know, part of the project design is to meet the needs of modifying fire fuels for the benefit of fire behavior, but also, you know, what if you want to manage your property? You know, eventually you're going to have to manage your property. And if you have endangered species on your property or archaeological resources on your property, you're going to want to know that, and you're going to want to manage it accordingly. You might really appreciate the fact that you have a nesting raptor on your property. I know I would. I think that would be pretty cool if I had biologists out there saying, you know what, we're going to delay the project because you've got nesting raptors over here. You know, I think we're going to get to the project. It's just we're not going to have an impact. There's no reason to negatively impact the environment. There's no reason to go through a stream, you know, and modify the hydrology of the stream. There's just no reason to do that. We can still meet the objective of the project. So,
Some time ago, months, years, whatever, decades ago, you had brought up the idea of a west slope sequel as covering the western slope, and that way any grant proposals that were falling within the western slope could have been covered by that document. Is it still possible that the County Fire Safe Council could have such a document prepared, and so that all of these CWPPs and everything else, put it in the back end of
so Ken mentioned that the U.S. Forest Service operates under the Sierra Nevada framework, and they have a supplemental to take actions within Cowboy footprint, you know, things of that nature. BLM, we're working in Georgetown on BLM land because they have a programmatic environmental impact report. The RCD did a supplemental environmental assessment for us to expand out on the area that we could treat under the programmatic EIR. I always thought that the Cal VTP, the California Vegetation Management Program, Vegetation Treatment Program, would allow us to programmatically approach CEQA on a larger landscape area. And it's supposed to do that, but it's a pain. And if we had a CWPP and we had proposed actions that were accurate, you know, like accurate maps, not just wiggly lines on a map that go through houses and other things. But if we had a accurate project, you know, plan like a CWPP that we could programmatically permit, I think that would be really a leap in the right direction. We would still have to do our surveys, we still have to do our diligence, but the proposed action would be programmatically, you know, vetted, and the public would have, it's like the general plan, safety element, right? I mean, it's the same, the scale doesn't really matter, right? And so you put that in your document, you tell people what it is, allow them a chance to participate in the process and comment, and then you're good. I think it's an awesome idea. You gotta push that little button.
You're good.
You're good.
Jerry Mosquito. Our last project that you managed for us, we had to have a CEQA, and it took a month before actually breaking ground on it. And I believe then you did it, just what you were talking about on scaling down just for our area in our fire district, and you recommended that we do the CEQA for all of our zones that we had on our CWPP.
Yeah.
Even though we were only going to affect 3 of the 9.
Mhm.
And I believe that you did that for us so that we're kind of cool on the next project. But the question I have though is, Chuck wrote that grant. And he put down an allowance for the CEQA. But what would we put down now?
Yeah,
I mean, if you say allow money for it, how much?
so on your first point, what we did in Logtown, Gold Ridge, Mosquito, you name it, in any community, we said, hey, let's file a CEQA document for this big area. Right? And let's file CEQA for everything that's in there, and when we implement a grant, it's just a phase of the project. Right? And so that's what we did, and that's paved the way. You know, we did Texas Hill, we said, let's adopt this entire plan, CEQA for the entire thing. You know, and it worked out. I mean, gosh, I mean, that's just been a really smart way to go. But then we include the budget. And that CEQA, that would go into doing the surveys that Elizabeth was talking about. We still have to do the surveys, archaeological surveys. We still have to do the biological surveys. We still have to do our consultation, tribal consultation, and that whole thing, that whole element of CEQA, all the requirements for CEQA still have to be done. Even though the CEQA notice of exemption or whatever the CEQA document was filed, that's done, but still doesn't mean we have to do our diligence to demonstrate compliance with CEQA. Oh, so. Honestly, we've done things pretty efficiently in the past. We,
10,000.
So you have a pretty small grant this time. So we are still going to, I have to look at your contract. I don't know exactly how much, I really don't, but I honestly, you have a $200,000. And so I would guesstimate that you're not gonna, there's a threshold, you know, how much does it cost us to get them out there?
Right.
You know, and so you know that, you know, and so you're not gonna get an archaeologist on site unless you're over, I mean, Marshall, that's a pretty small project, we're doing it, they're doing it for $10,000. You know, yet $100,000 for the Spanish Flat 2 project. For our earning, we're Grizzly Flats, we're over $340,000 for just an archaeologist. But you know, it's 2,000 acres. So it's, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Depends on scope.
Yeah, and exactly. So Coloma Lotus, my gosh, we got an archaeologist out there for 15,000. And there's a lot of roads, but you know what? There's a lot of information that exists already. I mean, how many times has Coloma been surveyed for archaeological resources? It's the hub of, you know, if they haven't found it, it's probably not there. So anyway, but then keep looking. Okay. Okay, and then we hire a registered professional forester, and you know, gosh, I remember walking around and I'd be like, okay, Patrick, I got a question. I'd do it myself, you know, and we came down to the point where we're like, you know what? We have to have a forester on this project. We have to have a licensed forester because a licensed representative should be delineating project boundaries, right? We need that license to protect the integrity of the project. We're not logging, you know, for the most part. We could, we can, we want to, but we're not. But we need someone to make sure that we're not, these projects are not CAL FIRE projects, that the RCD is the lead agency for CEQA. So therefore, we have to hire an archaeologist. If CAL FIRE was the lead agency, a forester could do it if they have archaeological certification. I could do it. I have archaeological certification. But we also we use the forest practice rules as a guideline to implement and design these projects. So our stream course protection zones, all of the design parameters that we build the project around are overseen by registered professional foresters so that we respect and adhere to the Board of Forestry, and the forest practices. As guidelines, and so it works. So we have a forester, we hired them, and they oversee also the contractor, because the forester is on site to delineate the project boundaries, but then also to engage with the contractor. They're what we call the first line, the hammer, if you will, or, you know. And then if there's a problem, then it comes to me. I'm more like the sledgehammer. And then if there's a problem there, then we go to CAL FIRE and they're the gorilla. They make a decision. And I remember like Bill Spanducci, you know, and all the times Patrick's been out there, and, you know, I can't tell you how many times we've said, CAL FIRE, we need you to come out here and resolve this problem for us. And when they come out there, they're not there to babysit, they resolve the problem, right? And so, you know, look out. So the forester, like, the forester better be doing his job. That's all I can say, because we get CAL FIRE out there and it's our fault. You know, I don't want to ever be in that situation. Yeah.
Another question. The word prescription, the word prescription keeps coming into my mind. Whenever we did our grants, the last one. It was like it helped us to explain to the homeowner what we're doing and what's going to be done. And when they come later, said, well, I expected this and this, and you show them the prescription, this is what they're following. Is that coming from the forester or?
So, so I usually write these grants in advance and the project description, and I do the prescriptions, on my own, because we don't have money to hire the foresters and the project team to develop all this, you know, planning time. That's where I'm going to the CAO about, like, saying, look, this is all about pre-planning, and you need to invest in these things before you apply for a grant, right? So do we need a forester to help us with these prescriptions, or do we just use the templates that we have? You know, we've kind of gotten away with the templates that we have, because we go out there and we look at the environment and we say, okay, this is appropriate. You know we're not going to go into Spanish flat areas and hit a chaparral unit with the same prescription. But we might be able to go into a Montane hardwood with a prescription that we have there, and it will work. We can go into a mixed conifers pine stand and apply a prescription that'll work. Or we can go into, even right when we get into the red fir zone, it's like, okay, what do we do there? What if we have a prescription that has, we just don't want to do fuel load reduction with 12 inches diameter species and under, excluding hardwoods, residential trees, and 90% of the brush. What if we have pockets of dead trees? You know, we want to extract those. In Patterson Ranch, we wrote a prescription that included removal of any tree that could be deemed as hazardous. And so they were able to remove all gray pine within 200 foot of the road, because they thought they were classified as hazardous. So we got written authorization to allow us to do that. We had a cost allocation plan for it, and we were able to apply that prescription for that specific environment. And so so I do my best, but before it happens, it gets signed off by a forester. Yeah.
Good.
So then the contractors. So I will tell you that everything that goes into a project has got to be done in a way that enables the contractor to be successful, because they're the ones who are going to be out there operating this really big bad machine that people are going to not like or really appreciate. And then they get the sense of what we're doing, right? So number one, they have to have good contract specifications. They have to have a good map. And they have to be able to be protected, so you don't have people walking in and out of their sites, you know, because somebody could get hurt. So we have to have signage. We have to make sure Holly, our communications person, anybody who has a right of entry agreement in a project receives an email every week updating them about the status of the project. Anybody who is going to have a contractor on their property the following week is going to get a direct phone call. Because we get it all the time. Your contractor showed up and I didn't know about it.
Can you back up a little bit about the process on how the putting out to bid and?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
okay, so whenever we have our project and we have our prescription, what we do is we have to go out and competitively bid. So the Resource Conservation District is a public agency. We are subject to the Public Resources Code, so we have to abide by state law in procurement of all contractors, licensing, insurances, and everything. That's kind of cool, I think, you know, that provides a level of protection to the homeowner, the landowner, and the crisis council and every partner we have. So we go out and we procure it, and we competitively bid these projects, and we have a really good reputation We have like 19 contractors working for us right now. We have from a individual owner operator to Columbia Helicopter flying a Chinook right now at the Sierra Terminal. We have a broad spectrum of contractors who apply for our projects and who enter into agreements with us. And
And you do a walkthrough to begin.
yes, and so.
Well, I'm just trying to
I like
get
that. And
fire state council fits into
Oh, yes.
this process, yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of where the RCD kind of takes it on, right? This is where we say, you know what, we got the ball, we're gonna run through and we're gonna take this on because this is what you guys need to rely on us for. And when we procure it, then we give people a chance to submit questions. We have a pre-bid meeting on site. We show them the project, we do a walkthrough, we read the contracts, we give them all the documentation. And then they bid on the project. And then we invite the fire safety council to be a part of the evaluation committee. And if there's no conflict of interest and someone signs, basically said, yep, I don't have a conflict of interest, I can help you rank these proposals. So we give you these proposals and you rank them and you read them on your own. We don't talk to anybody, you don't talk to us, we don't give you any guidance. We do this, we have a policy that we give you and a letter that you have to abide by. Because we don't want to jeopardize the integrity of the project, right? So if you agree to that, then you review those and you tabulate your scores, in accordance with the tabulation procedures. And then I get those as the point of contact of the evaluation committee. And I tabulate those and the numbers read themselves, right? They say we have 5 people, everybody here tabulates them and, Ernie, you got the contract. Congratulations. But before we issue the contract, we bring the evaluation committee together to say, okay, now this is the results. Is this the intent that you were looking for? Is there something that happened? Was there anything that you didn't understand? Is there any questions you can talk about amongst yourselves right now? And let's say that there was an evaluation member who just didn't get it at all, and they read it wrong. They just were out to lunch and they didn't realize that they interpreted something differently and they want to change their scores because they know more. They have the opportunity to do. So one chance to do that. Yes.
So there is no low bid requirement
No,
on CAL FIRE.
we do not do a seal or low bid requirement at all. Because we don't issue change orders either. We tell people right away that you will do the job at the agreed upon price within the time frame that you have at the scope of work that you have. And if you can't, we'll either get rid of you or, replace you, or you can walk away. But we don't do change orders and we don't allow the contractor to dictate what happens on the project. And for the most part, they're okay with it. If they're good with the unit, then they're okay with that. So then it goes, okay, so hang on a second. So the committee makes a recommendation. I, as district manager, make a recommendation to the Art Resource Conservation District Board of Directors. They accept the recommendation or not. If they do, then they authorize a notice of intent to award. The notice of intent to award is posted for 5 days. It also is coincidentally the protest period. So we only allow protests to any contractor who actually submitted a proposal. So if you were over here and you didn't even submit a proposal, you can't protest the project. There's ways that you could, try to stop the project or inquire or whatever. We can address that, but we can't we can't accept a protest unless you propose it on the project. So once we've never really had any propositions or protests to any project we've ever done. And all bids become public after the board authorizing it or executes an agreement with the award winning contractor. It's not low bid. It's quality of work, their commitment to the timing of the project, their capacity to meet the project, and experience and qualifications, and also their affirmative action, things like that. And we have trying to get into this. So we have a lot of contractors working for us right now, from the owner operator to really complicated big firms, and we have to set every project when they start working, they have to be successful. So with the good project map, the organizational chart, the communications, our oversight with our forester, all of those things have to set them up for success. Because if, then you go out there and you see that we have contractors going through a class 2 stream back and forth, she's gonna say, time out, what's going on here, guys? And then we have some things we have to explain. But the contractor ultimately is, let's say they go out there and we say, okay, you gotta go down the road to get to this project treatment area, and all of a sudden they're, 8,000 pound machine tears up the road. My gosh, when we were up working on the Weber Creek project with the Pulaski Branch Fire Safety Council, the contractor unloaded off their lowboy right on the shoulder of the road. And what was a bad road to begin with became a really bad road that they had to fix. And they have to fix that. We have the contractual language in there, the contractors have to repair the road damage. So what do? We videotape the entire road on both sides. So we know what the existing conditions were before the contractor gets there, so that we can say, yeah, you did, or no, you didn't. Because if the because we have a lot of times where a landowner or fire safe council calls us to say, you ruined our road. We can say, okay, yeah, we'll fix it, or actually, no, we didn't. And I would say 7 out of 10 times. I go to them and say, no, we didn't, because we have photos, we have video, and I'm sorry, so one way or another, we just try to do what we can to protect the integrity of the project. So, but that being said, a lot of people bid on the projects. So when we have a pre-bid meeting, we have a lot of people who show up to bid on the projects, which is really kind of cool. I mean, it's humbling to know that there's people in the industry that want to work on your projects. I don't think that's the case in a lot of areas. I think that we're fortunate because we, 1, we issue good contracts, 2, we pay on time. And 3, we set up a good project for them. And that being said, with the contracts, with the construction contractor, with the environmentalist, with the forester, with the CEQA filings, with the postage, with all of that, the RCD fronts the entire cost of all projects. We don't get advance payments, we don't do that, we front all those costs. We're probably going to be spending upwards to $12 million in the next 6 weeks. And so we front all that, and then we submit invoices and we get reimbursed. So that's one of the other things that we do as an RCD is manage the cash flow for the project so that we can make sure we can keep it going, right? Contractors aren't going to wait 3 to 5 months to get paid. Okay.
Well, and I just wanted to kind of reiterate that is some time that you should be prepared to spend is on these bid review. If at least one person from your fire safe council, preferably 2, would participate in the bid review, and it takes a lot of time. Like I just spent a couple hours reviewing the archaeological bids for one of our projects, and the contractor bids are even more extensive usually. And I had no idea what I was doing the first time I was bidding or reviewing them too. So I've learned over time. So that's why I've now gotten more people involved in it, so that people can learn learn how to review them properly. Because that's a piece of it too. You don't always know what you're doing at the beginning.
Okay, so now you've got the work is starting. And all of a sudden, you've got some crazy lady out there putting barbed wire around the masticating head. So when the operator starts up in the morning, someone's going to get killed. And that happened in Mosquito, right? We have people put in Goldbug Park. We have people pour water in the gas tank in one of our pieces of equipment. We've had sand put into the engine. We've had, you name it, and we've experienced it. We've had on vacant lands where the owner lives down in Arizona or LA, and he's got 12 acres. And, people know that people don't live there, and they start growing marijuana on the property. And we go out there and we're like, oh, okay. And these guys show up and have shotguns or machine guns, and we're there. We've seen that. It's happened. Homeless encampments are everywhere. You go out Cable Road, you go out Forbay, you go everywhere. Homeless encampments are everywhere. And it's like, okay, what do we do with this situation? You expect the unexpected is what I'm trying to say. And you got to be on site. You have to be out there. There's going to be people putting information on the app next door, and you could be doing everything really, really, really well. We're working on over 2,000 people's property right now, and we hear nothing. I mean, what was said today was really pretty awesome. from Strawberry, and Bob, you and everything. We don't get that, you know, as you get involved in these projects, no one is ever going to say thank you. You're only gonna hear about the complaints. I mean, you're only gonna hear about the people who are blaming you for not doing enough. You know, and so your communications are gonna be your defense. You're gonna say, we told you when the contractor was gonna be there. You know, I mean, the communications program in your league is astronomically hugely important. Because the community is gonna always say, I didn't hear about it. I didn't know what was going on. I never got that information. The website, people have to have access to the information. If they don't get it in the mail, they gotta get it somehow. So we're hoping to improve our communications, the tools that we have. And so, but you're always gonna hear from somebody, no matter what you do, and you're gonna have to spend time explaining. They're not even gonna be involved in the project. And they're gonna take up a huge amount of your time. And my message here is that let us take that on. You know, let us carry that and say, we're the ones who are responsible for this. We're the ones managing the project. Come and talk to us, you know, and there's a big problem, then we're gonna bring the grill in and you're gonna be in trouble. Because if the ad shows up and people understand that, oh, okay, I guess these guys are pretty efficient. You know, they do know what they're doing. But anyway, communications, property owners, if we can leave as much information with landowners as we possibly can, the better. If the landowner says, I really appreciate this phase of my management of my property, a lot of times we see people and we're like, hey, you know, you've got some really great timber, or there were some areas that you couldn't do. Let's leave you with a recommendation on how to do that on your own. So we'll leave people who request it with a forest management plan that allows them with information on how to continue the work that they would do. How do you maintain this? How do you manage this in time? We will leave you with information like we did in Lake Hills one time. Here's some options for you to maintain this property. What if, you know, we work with the Native Plant Society and say, you know what, here's some fire-wise landscaping techniques that you can use because we just nuked it, right? And here's some things that you might want to do to manage your property, so plants you can plant, you know, and here's the ones you don't want to, you know, so this is where your education program really comes in. You just don't want to masticate the property and walk away, right? That would be a crime to do that. You've got to work with the landowners to let them know about what you did and then leave them with information on how to manage the property moving forward. This is really kind of cool bullet point is on-site, you know, management by the project manager. We lost our project manager. The RCD is trying to hire more project managers, but I'm also thinking, you know, like with South County, you know, we've got Mason, Bruce, and Gerard, a really good, high quality firm with really a lot of people. So I'm like, hey, you guys, step in and help me do project management on this. So they're going to be going to the coordination meetings. They're going to be coordinating with the archaeologists. They are doing the forestry work. They're doing the flagging and the mapping. So we're going to use them as more of a project manager. We may hire an individual for the Georgetown project or the Spanish Flat project just to work on that project. You know, so we're going to be looking at how project management is done and trying to approach it in a couple of different ways because I think the projects are demanding not just a one and done type of approach, but how do we have the best services to each individual project that we can. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but we can't do it with just staffing, right? So we're finding ways of bringing in consultants to help us with project management. So.
Well, and I think that the really important thing is that there's somebody on site from your RCD when the work is happening. So if any of the landowners have an issue or problem or questions, there's somebody there who's talking to them. We just had that with somebody who had signed a right of entry agreement and then decided she didn't want to participate and threw a whole fit, but and you know, called the sheriff, called the fire department, called everybody to try to shut the whole project down. And it would have been easier for her to do that if the project manager hadn't been on site already talking to her and RCD wasn't already communicating with the fire, you know, the fire department already knew about the project. And so speaking to the importance of communication, but also having somebody on site, there are going to be people that for whatever reason just want to either shut it down or cause a problem. And so it's just very helpful to have somebody there who's not the contractor, but who's the project manager. So
Yeah, I think let us take a lot of the burden on, or that you have a different project manager for your projects. Don't let them give you the scope of work. You have to tell them what you need, you know what I mean? Because you're just gonna fall short. All these different nuances that come and go on these projects, oh, that's, your project manager could issue a change order. How crazy would that be? You don't want to be in that situation. So, okay, closing out the project. And this is where you basically are preparing the information that's going to go to your grantor to let them know that you did what you told them you were going to do, and that the money was a really good investment. And that you can be funded again. That's really important. So that being said, narrate your accomplishments, and again, quantify them as much as you can. How many acres did you treat? How many landowners did you work with? How many public meetings did you have? Quantify them, because they need those numbers, right? Recognize and thank people, as I mentioned, you might want to have, tomorrow we're having a big contractor appreciation luncheon, because people are committing a lot of time, and their morale is important. So you want to say thank you to people, and at the end of the project, you want to go around and have a community meeting and say thank you and make people who gave you a hard time feel better. No.
Yes, you do.
Photo essay, you're gonna have a complete photo essay of all the different photo points. So what we do is we have a project map and we do photo points. And we go to that photo point before, during, and after the project. So you have a photo essay that's a report as part of the final report that we give you that shows what you did throughout the project before, during, and after. And then we have different things like, here's the type of equipment we use. Here's landscape type pictures. So you'll have photo essays and a data dump of digital information. We'll have everything about the project that you ever wanted. It'll have CEQA, it'll have the contracts, it'll have the photos, it'll have the field notes, it'll have everything. A complete project record will be provided at the end of the project. So lessons learned. This is where we come back and we meet with the Fire State Council and say, give me the good and the bad name. And this is where talk about the good, talk about the bad, talk about the ugly. Don't not say something that should be said. Nobody's gonna hurt somebody's feelings, sure. If you say, you know what, you guys really dropped the ball on right of entry games, or you know what, you really dropped the ball because we promised this landowner that they were going to treat it and you never got over it. So anyway, take advantage of this opportunity. And then how are we going to maintain the investment of the public dollar in this landscape? That's going to be really important because Mike Conley isn't here, but he might be online, but he will vouch for, I remember it saying like, we're going to continue investing in Alamo Trail because are they maintaining it? Oh, they are. Alamo Trail stepped up and said, yeah, we're going to do assessment of fees. We've got an HOA. We're going to apply money. We're going to do maintenance on this stuff. And that has gone a long way. They've got the Bureau of Reclamation on board to say, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to help you. There might be, if you do not have a long-term maintenance plan, I don't even try applying for a grant. Because if you don't have this element as a narrative description, it can be conceptual. Your right of entry agreement is not going to provide you this level of reassurances, but at least you maybe have a plan. And that's an important thing. If you walk away from it and just say, oh, I will apply for another grant later, we won't be there. Please, so that's it. So
no, I just was. Come on.
okay. No. No, gosh, you guys, this team of people right here is amazing. So just thank you for all the support you guys give.
Yeah. From your side, like you're the grantor side, anything that you're seeing in our presentation that you wanted to comment on or improve upon, I would love to hear that if you have time for this about. Or anything we didn't cover that's important. Thank you.
Patrick Daniel, Cal Fire. I would just say,
this evening a grant idea, application idea. Before the call for grants, contact us and run it by us by field battalions and get you some feedback and make your application better. I also say after you get a grant, call me, schedule a time with me to come out and look at the area, so I can get a feel for what you're doing on the ground. Let's try to do that with the grantees. Certainly coordinate like we did with all the grantees who got roadside fuel reduction grants a few cycles ago. Really important to make sure we're not looking at doing the same piece of road and to find out, if we're out there. So coordination, and when you do your progress reports, like Mark was talking about, before and after photos, I sometimes I get these progress reports, like we did this, doesn't have like a treatment area map, it doesn't have photos of what was done, if you provide me with that stuff, it makes my job easier. If I don't really feel like I know what went on, then I'm gonna call you up and say, let's go out and look at it on the ground together. So just do things to make it go more smoothly.
And in terms of the final group, the final photo essay and report on the project, actually only one of our projects has been completed. And one of our volunteers did a whole PowerPoint on everything that happened, all the acres treated, the different lands, pictures of the equipment. These are what these before and after pictures are from. And then at the right after that project was completed, there was a 1/4 acre fire that happened like right next to the road, and CAL FIRE actually posted something on their Facebook page saying this is an example of how these fuel breaks actually stop fires. And so then we added that to the report, and I've been going around for the last couple of years and different things on the divide showing, the Rotary Club, the board members of the fire department, all kinds of, but anywhere I can speak to talk to people about the benefits of these projects. So having somebody, whether it's you or somebody else in your team, preparing a comprehensive PowerPoint that you can use to talk about the project later is really helpful for building support for your future projects. Yeah,
So we should just go ahead and set a little fire afterward, just.
I know, right? You were actually worried the contractor started the fire.
Just testing.
I know, right? So yeah, so that's the end of our presentation. If we have questions or anything you think we should have covered that we didn't, or that's what I'd like to.
Just one comment on kind of pre-planning and getting maybe more resources to help you get to ROEs and stuff. One thing we found helpful in our area is we can have a local who does land for the absentee owners, because especially if they've been there, that's one of our areas, they've been there since like the 49ers came over, I think. And they know every family that has ever owned land in the area, and they are a huge resource. They just said, I worked with, Bob or, Mary, 20 years ago when I sold them.
Good thing my guns are all locked up.
Maybe a suggestion. We actually have a realtor team too. I forgot to have that.
Right side.
Yeah.
Do it. We see it.
I know Steve. How do you plan for a project you have no idea what it even is going to be? So that was my thinking around. Talk about the project first, and then we'll go back and talk about how do you plan, and then the final piece is how do you prepare a grant. But in my 30 years experience doing grant proposals, it's the least of what you're actually doing. Everything. The project is the grant is a means to an end. What you're really trying to do is a project. So that's what you need to figure out. The grant then practically writes it down. Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, it's very-